flood on Monday, and it kind of took out the entire building except for one small piece, including this room. So this has been renovated since Monday, so we cleaned it up just for you. I want to try to stay on task tonight. We are trying to have a hard close at 7. In the event that the dialogue continues after 7, you're welcome to stay and do that. But those that need to leave and want to leave, don't feel embarrassed about getting up and leaving. We did say a hard close at 7. We have many different individuals from our community in Seneca Falls. We actually have one person from Waterloo, where he's not, so good to have you here. Thank you. We wanted to talk to those that really, truly are the economic engine for our town. And they're from industrial, retail, environmental, manufacturing, educational, cultural preservation. All of these working together are what make us successful in any community. And it's good to have you here, and I really appreciate all of you coming. It's a big deal. This discussion was scheduled primarily because of recent events. Frankly, one that's not well publicized is the reforming or revitalization of the Seneca Falls Development Corporation. This was headed up by Don Earl, our town supervisor, Amo Bovey, and Chad Sanderson, both from the board, from the town board, and Peter Brown, now the deputy director of Seneca County. The SFDC was not in compliance with many New York State regulations. Many of the board members resigned, and it just fell to the wayside. We lost our executive director, and due to the efforts of these individuals, we were able to reform, and since then, about a year ago, we've laid out a strategy. The town has provided funding to hire an economic development officer or the executive director for the Seneca Falls Development Corporation, and we're very energized. I'm on the board, and I can tell you that it's exciting to see the steps that have been taken. You'll find that we have a plan that's already in place. Many of the components in that plan, specifically developed for the former village and the town of Seneca Falls, have not been implemented. And we'll reintroduce those tonight so that we can have some dialogue and take into account the things that are occurring right here in our midst. And I'll talk about specifics later. But before we start talking about Seneca Falls, we thought it appropriate to provide a success story all the way from Cayuga County. And we've got Andy Fish, the executive director of the Cayuga County Chamber of Commerce, and he's been there since July 2009. In November 2012, through an agreement between the boards of the Cayuga Economic Development Agency, CEDA, and the Chamber of Commerce, Andy was named the director of the CEDA while maintaining the directorship of the Chamber. Over the past 2 years plus, they formed a joint venture aligning respective staffs. Further, during this time, CEDA has emerged into a one-stop shop for economic development in Cayuga County. By securing a contract with the county and agreements with the IDA to deliver administrative services. It's unique to our area, but not unique to the country. This type of regionalization and identifying a region as something special and unique is very important to the success for not just Seneca Falls, but for Seneca Falls, Waterloo, the entirety of Seneca County. Andrew is also an entrepreneur and a farmer, which I found out a few weeks ago. He and his wife Kim reside on a 20-acre farm in the town of Conquest with 3 horses, but more importantly, 50 plus dairy goats. In November 2010, Andrew and his wife launched their New York State Agricultural Market Certified Farmstead Goat Cheese Operation, 4-Tin Fish Farm, where they make artisanal goat cheese for a local market that includes restaurants and direct customers. It's sort of like the success story of Miranda Cheese, right down the road from us in Waterloo. Andrew currently serves on several local and regional community boards, the Central New York Regional Economic Development Council, the Cayuga County Office of Tourism, and the Auburn Downtown Business Improvement District, and the Farm Bureau of Cayuga County. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Andrew and have him provide you with a presentation.
Pardon me while I pull up the technology here. Your bio sounds always a lot better when you write it as opposed to when you hear it, when it's being read to a group of people. All right. So, as Menzo said, I'm here to talk a little bit about what's happened in Cayuga County over the last couple of years. Actually, really, it's been over the last 5 years. It's been a very long process, a very long discussion that's happened in the community. And I'm the one here giving this presentation, but by no means has this been a project that has been only involved with myself and our organizations. And I'll go through a little bit about what it has taken in Cayuga County to get to where we are. And, you know, the truth of the matter is that we're probably still not even there yet. I guess kind of in economic development, you can never really say you're there yet. It's always about continuing to work and continuing to do more. But we are pretty proud of what's happened there, not only because of the structure that we've put in place, but also the results that we've seen. And I'll try and touch a little bit about that. But when I started with the Chamber 5 years ago, we had, we'll skip that. We had a model which is not uncommon for many communities throughout New York State because of just some of the natural ways that we've seen stuff happen. And it was what I would consider a siloed approach, and some communities do this siloed approach very well and actually collaborate very well, and we were one of them, even though we had what you can count there as 7 different organizations working on economic development. For the most part, they all talked, generally speaking. But there were still times when certain projects came out and they ended up competing with each other as opposed to competing on behalf of the community. So we had a Planning and Economic Development Department at our county office building, and county employees that were providing services for economic development and planning. We had the Cayuga County Industrial Development Agency, that was one of our 2 IDAs. We're blessed to have 2 IDAs in Cayuga County. We had the Cayuga County Development Corporation, the CCDC, which at the time was a subsidiary of the Cayuga Industrial Development Agency, the CCIDA. We also then, for the City of Auburn, had an Office of Planning and Economic Development. So once again, another set of staff working on economic development and planning specific to the City of Auburn. Then we had the Auburn Industrial Development Authority. So that was actually, it is actually an authority as opposed to an agency. This has a different level of complication. Auburn was one of the first 2 IDAs in the state. Troy is the only other one that actually was created prior to the legislation that created the rest of the IDAs throughout New York State. So it's under different legislation, which creates another level of complication when trying to collaborate. Then we had the Auburn Local Development Corporation, ALDC, and then the Cayuga County Chamber of Commerce, which had a long history of being involved in economic development, but in all honesty, when I came along 5 years ago, there was very little actual activity that was taking place at the Chamber in regards to economic development. There was some advocacy going on, there was a lot of good member services, but not a lot of economic development. It's also what we call the alphabet soup. The acronyms, the acronyms follow them, and so much so that in our Leadership Cayuga program, when we did our economic development session, we literally called it the alphabet soup of economic development and went through the different acronyms, the different organizations and what they did, and talked about how well they worked together, because they really did work very well. It could have been much, much worse. But in addition to what was going on just in the area of economic development and my role with the Chamber, I started in July of 2009, and in July of 2009, Cayuga County had a forum at BOCES that was attended by well over 120 plus business leaders in the community. And it was focusing on economic development because they've been having conversations for decades about how do you coordinate, how do you collaborate, how do you work more closely, because there had been issues that arose between the city and the county both having economic development activities. And it really, the prime example that is used in Cayuga County, one example that everyone points to and talks about kind of anecdotally, is the Target. So there was a Target that was looking at coming to Auburn and Cayuga County, but because of the way that sales tax is generated in Cayuga County, the city city of Auburn actually preempts. So they keep 2% of whatever is generated. They keep their 2% of whatever is generated in the city and don't get anything that's generated outside of the city. And the county gets their other 2% as part of the 4% of the local, and then the rest of the stuff that's generated in the rest of the county is distributed to the towns and villages. If you don't understand that, I don't have the time to explain it. It creates a problem though, because what that basically means is that if something develops outside the city does not get any of that sales tax. And if it develops inside that city, then they get a greater share of it, and the other towns and villages don't get as much of that sales tax. So the community was having this dialogue because Target was looking at coming in, and it got to the point where the two organizations, the two planning and economic development departments, were being told by their superiors, by the electeds, that you've got to figure out a way to make sure this is in our community or outside of the city, or the city was saying you got to make sure it's inside of the city. And Target said, we're not interested in coming to a place where you can't figure out which side of the line that doesn't matter to us you want to put us on. So they left. And so that kind of really was kind of a spurring moment, an aha moment for the community of, okay, this is not something that can continue. How do we figure out a way to get this going? By the way, that particular anecdote was pre-recession, so pre-AIDS, back 2006, 2007. So it took a couple of years just to get to the forum after that significant issue. So this is not an easy situation. But at that forum, what the community said was, you know what, we need a coordinating agent. We need a one-stop. But the challenge of the lift of going from all of those organizations that I lifted to a one-stop in a matter of months was almost an impossible lift in Cayuga County, as it is in any community. And so what was created was CEDA, the Cayuga Economic Development Agency. And that was created really with the idea of being a first stop. It was a new local development corporation, 501c3, that was formed. And it was very strategic in how the board was established. There are 6 people by title on the CEDA board. It's the chairman of the legislature, the mayor of the city, the 2 IDA chairs, so both the Auburn and the Cayuga County IDAs, the BOCE superintendent, and at the time, the chamber director, myself, was also one of those 6 by title. And the other 9 members of that board came from the private sector, because the other thing that the community said very strongly was, this needs to be led by the private sector. But what the public sector was saying is, these are our dollars, these are our abatements, these are our things that are on the table, so we need to have a voice. And by the way, we want to be able to go back to our bodies, our elected bodies, and be able to advocate on behalf of this. So if we're at the table and if we have a seat and have an understanding, we can do that. So it was very strategic how CEDA was established. In 2009, in December, it was incorporated. In 2010, had their first official meeting, hired their first director in the summer of 2010. At the same time, the chamber was looking for some new offices, and so we co-located with CEDA at 2 State Street. And we decided to do that because we wanted to be able to collaborate better, and what better way to do that than kind of share a coffee pot and have conversations about what's going on, understanding that there was things that CEDA couldn't share with the chamber that they were working on that may have been confidential. So there were some things we couldn't discuss, but that was the intent. That was why we co-located. They were brand new. We were moving to new space. We set it up so that there was an opportunity for them to do that. So we did that in February of 2011. Of course, the Regional Economic Development Councils were established in August of 2011, and this kind of, in Cayuga County, threw a little bit of a monkey wrench in the discussions and the dialogue. And sometimes this is where personalities can get in the way of things and cause things to be problematic, and sometimes this is when other opportunities present themselves. So in central New York, all of the other counties had a representative from economic development, specifically from either their IDAs or the LDCs, that were put on the Central New York Regional Economic Development Council. From Cayuga County, for whatever reason, whether it was because CEDA was too newly established and they didn't necessarily want to have the municipal employees be there, I was the one that was asked in Cayuga County to fill that role on the Central New York Regional Economic Development Council. So that created some opportunities for us to continue the collaboration, but also created a little bit of friction and a little bit of challenge between the CEDA executive director and myself, and some of the other leadership in the community that at the time still didn't necessarily view the chamber as important in economic development. So CEDA also, I want to tell you, was working on a countywide strategic plan. We were helping them in a lot of the forums and roundtables that they were having and convening some folks, and really put together a very solid strategic plan that we're still referencing and utilizing today. And that's important because it was very, very much in the same timeline as the REDC. And so we were able to come to the table with the regional council and say, this is our strategy, we've been working on it, so please make sure this is present in the regional council's plan. So because CETA had been doing that work collaboratively with some of the organizations even beforehand, we were able to come to the table when the regional council was putting together their plan and actually have a voice that was really synthesized for our community. Even though we were still in very much a siloed situation, we were speaking with one voice because of the work that was being done by the Economic Development Agency. So fast forward another year after this, and there's a lot of things that happened between November or August of 11 and November of 12 that ended up having the executive director of CETA at that time take another position and go elsewhere. The main thing is that the county was very much interested in CETA always being a one-stop and not a first stop. That was always the hope and always the dream. And honestly, they thought it was going to be on a much more accelerated timetable than it was, because CETA had been originally set up with a 3-year contract with the county. And so there was some disappointment on behalf of the county leadership as to what CETA had or had not accomplished during that time. And also, at the very same time, the city was going through some financial challenges and essentially gutted their economic development office. Any of the people that they had that were full-time economic development professionals, or even those that were facilitating that work in a part-time role, were let go. And so the city essentially said, we're out of the economic development game. Yes, we still have the IDA, we're providing staffing services to it, but in a very much a reactive way, no proactive work being done, no business retention and expansion work, no marketing and attraction work. They just said, look, we can't afford to do this. CETA, you represent the county, we're part of the county, please do some work on our behalf. We don't have any resources for you, but please do some work on our behalf. And so that happened in the summer of 2012. And so the county said, well, if there's going to be an opportunity for us to really look at a one-stop, now's the time. Now's the time for the city who's throwing up their hands saying we can't afford anything. How do we move forward? So I think that there was some desires on the part of the director at that time to not necessarily take that organization to that level, so another position was taken. But it was also a very tenuous time for CETA because the 3-year contract that it had ended at the end of 2012. It did not have a contract for services with the county moving into 13. It had enough money to get through about 6 months worth of about 8 months worth of its current operations. And so they were in no position to go out and find a new executive director with 1 month left of their contract, nothing new on the horizon. So at the time, because we'd been involved, we had a seat at the table on the board, because we had been working well with the Regional Economic Development Council and working somewhat as a convener through that process, the CETA board went to the chamber board and said, please provide us with interim director services until we can figure out what direction we're going. So in November of 2012, that was put in place. What's not on here is the next part of it, which was by April of 2013, we had a contract with the county for 1 year to do one stop with the understanding that we would be coming back to the table in 2014 for a multi-year contract. And at a much increased rate because they wanted us to spend down our reserve that we had developed and use some of their funding in 13, and then they would look at coming in and supporting us with some more funding in 14. But the other thing that happened was, as I was serving as both director of the chamber and the director of the Economic Development Agency, I was going into meetings now as the Economic Development Director and sitting at the table going, this is important information for me as the chamber director. This is important information, I'm sure, to the IDA directors. And this is important information that really everyone should be having. So if I'm not doing my job, if I'm just the CETA director, if I'm not doing my job of sharing that information, that's a breakdown in communication and those opportunities are lost. On the flip side of that, I knew all along that there was meetings I was invited to as the chamber director that were also important for the CETA director to have been involved in, the IDA director. And there was an opportunity there to maybe streamline some of this. But I said, look, this shouldn't be about what I think could or could not happen. So we formed a strategic partnership committee. It was the executive committees of both the chamber and the CETA board, and they started in April of 2013. And they said, what we want to look at is there opportunity for collaboration here? And if there is opportunity for collaboration, how do we make that work with the guiding principles that we've laid out? And those guiding principles were pretty stringent. It had to do with the fact that they did not want to lose the brand identity of any of the organizations that were there. They wanted to retain the missions. They only wanted to move forward in a partnership that they could increase their ability to effectively provide their services to their consumers, stakeholders, clients, members, whatever you want to call them. They wanted to make sure that however they did it was a sustainable model, not one that was just going to work for a couple of years and then fall by the wayside. And they wanted to make sure that it was politically feasible, because if there was no support for something like this, and making this collaboration happen was going to take the key stakeholder for CETA, which was the county, and say, we're out, no funding for you, that went against the sustainability model and all the other stuff that we were trying to do. So that work continued, and they were working on that. And one of the things that they did was, let's just look at where the duplication of services are. And so we took the current activities of Chamber and CETA, and we went through and we said, okay, what is the work that's being done? And we looked at the area of economic development, visitations, project assistance, marketing, promotions, entrepreneurial, regional and state collaboration, countywide strategy, all of those things. Said, what areas there overlap? We looked at the area of advocacy. What areas there overlap? We looked at member services. Not a whole lot of overlap there. CETA wasn't created as a 501c6 an association, so that was really all the chamber's work. And then we looked at events, and there was definitely some events that we were duplicating on. And so we said, look at all these opportunities for collaboration. How do we streamline this? When we're done, I will I'll share a link with you, but it's still on the chamber's website. We put out an entire report that was just one little infographic in that report about how this process was gone, what stages we went through, what questions we asked, how our guiding principles guided us, and how we arrived at the conclusion of what we wanted to do. The other thing that happened was in September of 2013, as part of, I mentioned before, that county one-stop contract that we received in April, the CCIDA entered into an administrative services contract with CETA. So we were still having these discussions with CETA and Chamber on one side, and on the other side, the CCIDA was going to us and saying, we're going to write you a check annually to provide us with our services. You make sure that you're doing all of our Paris reporting, you make sure you're doing all of our cost-benefit analysis, all of our public hearings, all of our pilot invoicing, make sure that we're in compliance with everything. So we added a staff person in June in anticipation of this, knowing that we needed to gear up more than just myself and an administrative assistant and my chamber manager and a few others. So that happened in September of 13. At the same time, the boards reviewed that strategic partnership report. In August was the first time they saw it. September was the first month that they reviewed it officially at their board meetings. At the same time, I will tell you, we were having extremely large amounts of offline conversations with our stakeholders, with our elected officials, with the county, with the city, with the IDA board members, making sure that everyone who had a stake in this was comfortable with the direction we were going with this. Because again, we didn't want to be counterproductive. We didn't want to move forward with a collaboration that was only going to serve the purpose of creating more havoc as opposed to creating more efficiencies. And so that was when they made the approval, the September meeting. They voted on that, and we announced it in October at our annual dinner. Funny story about that is we closed the meeting announcing that we were forming this joint venture, and there was no reaction from the 300 people that were there. None, zero. The press was there, and they came up and asked us questions about the presentation at the dinner. Nothing to do with our announcement at the end. And so I was scratching my head and could not figure out what was going on. I said, did we just not say it right? Did we just not, send the message right? And so I called up a couple of people the next day and I said, did you understand the announcement that we made at the end? And they said, yeah, you just said you're going to keep doing what you've been doing for the last year, right? I mean, because we had been doing executive director services and functioning in an interim arrangement. And I said, well, I guess so, yeah. And they're like, okay, sounds good. Keep up the good work, move along. So we obviously had done enough groundwork leading up to that and shown enough success that it really wasn't as big of an issue as we thought it was going to be. So what we've decided to do was form a joint venture, a brand new organization. Now, I know it sounds completely nuts to form another alphabet soup component in order to clear up the alphabet soup confusion. But the reason why we did this is we really found that this was the best opportunity to maintain all of the things that we wanted to maintain. So we still have two separate board of directors with the Chamber and CETA. We still have two separate missions that does have some overlap. We still have the governance model that's going in place in both of them. And so what we did is we formed Cayuga Strategic Solutions. And the only purpose that that organization serves is to provide strategic solutions to the business community through its partner organizations. It doesn't have any services of its own. Its only existence is to formalize the partnership between those two entities. And what we did is we took all of the staff of both organizations and we have officially, according to the Department of Labor and the IRS, put them under Cayuga Strategic Solutions umbrella. Now, there are clear definitions and delineations of duties and responsibilities for those employees, and I'll get into that in a second. Because the one thing that we knew very much going into it is that the money we were bringing in from the county to do economic development couldn't be paying my chamber manager to go out and do the membership. Right? You just can't do that with the county taxpayer dollars. The reverse of that, though, is not necessarily true. I can have my chamber manager going and helping on an economic development project. So that was one of the things that was beneficial to us, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. So formed it almost, well, it's been over a year now, and I'm pleased to say it. So far, so good. It's working. In that time so the other point I'll make about this is that I'm really kind of glossing over a lot of stuff here. In January of 14, we expected the county to give us a new contract that was for 3 years at a rate of $350,000 a year in order to deliver these services. The previous amount had been $175,000 that they'd been bidding. And in October, when the tentative budget was released, it was released with only $175,000. So we spent October, November, and December of 2013 fighting to get our $350,000. So we got our $350,000. So then we went into January hoping that our contract would be approved, and we get paid at the end of the quarter. So we got to have enough cash flow to get us through each quarter. So we knew we just had to have a contract in place by the end of March. Well, we were expecting that to be a very easy process in January, and somehow there was some issues because they still didn't understand how we had a cash reserve and why we had a cash reserve. Isn't that their money anyway? We shouldn't go back to them. Valid questions if we hadn't already given them the answers multiple times, and so we were a little frustrated with it. And it took us until the end of March, when we were supposed to have our first payment, to get a contract in place, and it was only a one-year contract. It was only a contract for 2014. And I now had to go out and staff up and hire people to provide these economic development services. We hired 2 new people in April and May of that year. And once we knew the funding was in place in December, I will tell you we started the hiring process. But if we'd have known the funding was in place in October, we could have started it even sooner. We were basically a quarter behind in 2014 in trying to deliver on the things that we said we would be able to do as a one-stop. I'm pleased to say that we were able to deliver on all the things that we said we were going to be able to do as a one-stop in 2014. We're running our numbers right now, but we've seen over $23 million worth of private investment that we've touched in projects that we've assisted in. That's leveraged that's accessed almost $5 million in incentives, either through the IDA or through state resources, through the regional council process or otherwise. It's creating over 124 new jobs. We had over 120 one-on-one business visitations. Those are unique companies that we were able to proactively go out and visit in Cayuga County last year. We sat down and talked with about 50 plus entrepreneurs that were looking at opening a business through our business development specialist services. And we were able to respond within a 24-hour period to about 14 different leads that came through from state or otherwise sources on attraction opportunities that were coming. And those are just, those are some of the outcomes, and those are a lot of the activities that we were able to do last year. So I'm really looking forward to what we can do this year with a fully staffed operation. And I'm also pleased to tell you that in June of 2014, once we did hire both of those people, we also had the Auburn IDA enter into a contract with us to provide staffing services, administrative services to them. So now we are staffing both IDAs in Cayuga County. And breathe a sigh of relief. On Tuesday of this week, the legislature just approved our 3-year contract for 15, 16, and 17 to deliver these services at a rate of $350. What we've told them is we're not going to come back and ask for you to give us more each year. We know that $350 is the base. In fact, we believe that for a county like Cayuga, with the city of Auburn and the economy that we have there, a truly robust economic development program is going to run probably about $600,000 to $700,000 annually in costs and operations. And that's not grant pass-throughs. That's really the work that we should be doing on a regular basis, the marketing and promotion that we should be doing, the staff support, the programming that we should be putting in place. And what we've told the county is, we're not going to ask you for more than $350, but we're always going to ask you for $350. And so, that's what we've told them, and we've been pretty clear about that, and they understood that so far going in. But we'll see 3 years from now. So what does the Cayuga Strategic Solutions Organization chart look like? This is the CETA board and its organization and the chamber board. When we first did this, we didn't have it in a Venn diagram like this. We actually put CSS up here in a box with lines drawn. And so everyone assumed that Cayuga Strategic Solutions was the parent organization of these other two, which is absolutely not the case. In fact, in anything, it's the child of these other two organizations. Its sole purpose is to deliver services to those folks. So where that overlap is the executive committees from each board, and that's the CSS board. So I technically have 5 boards that I report to, 6 if you count the county ledge right now. But we have both IDAs, which we're providing staff services to. We've got CETA in the chamber and CSX. But that's how that function goes. I guess 7 count the chamber foundation, but that only means on a quarterly basis. So then you have the executive director who's providing those services to both of those, all of those organizations and entities. These are contractual relationships between CETA and the county and the IDAs. Okay, so those are really just contracts for services. We've got a scope of services in those contracts that we deliver on. You know, this is an employment relationship, and these boards have governance over the body of work and the programs specific to their areas. So then this is what the staffing model looks like. We have 3 individuals that are dedicated strictly to the economic development activities of what we do. The economic development specialist, the business development specialist, and the economic development technical specialist. My economic development specialist focuses entirely on BR&E, business retention and expansion, does that visitation work, does that triage, so to speak, of the local economy and what's happening, does the SWOT analysis when he goes in. He's out there not only looking for growth opportunities, but he's out there looking for threats that could cause us to have announcements. You know, 3 months into doing this interim thing, in February of 2013 is when Dyke and McQuay announced its closure of the Auburn facility. Welcome to the job of Economic Development Director, here you go. So those are the kind of things we want to avoid, and by getting out there ahead of time and having this work be done, that's how we're able to do this. The business development specialist, marketing, promotion, attraction, and startups. So they focus on the entrepreneurial stuff, the marketing, and the attraction work. And our technical specialist is a numbers guru. She's the geek of the office. She does all of our Paris reporting. She does all of our underwriting for the loan programs. So that's part of our scope of service with the counties. We underwrite the CDBG loan program for them. And then also does all of our special projects. So we had the privilege of writing the Startup New York plan for community college, and that was her project that we turned over recently. There are 3 staff that are dedicated strictly to chamber operations. My role as executive director, both organizations knew that much of my focus was going to be spent on economic development activities, which is part of the chamber's mission, but not so much anymore on membership and events. And so I had an internal candidate that was fantastic for this. She'd been finance director of the chamber for about 6 years, and so we promoted her to chamber manager. Her role now is really focused on membership and events and all of those activities within that, member benefits, and how members can get value in what they're doing. I have an education coordinator which runs our Leadership Cayuga program, as well as we have a grants information center, or a cooperating collection foundation center. I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I got a lot of this spelled out later. And then we also have a navigator. We're a subcontractor to the Cayuga Seneca Community Action Agency. So actually we provide access to the small business marketplace, navigation services to small businesses in Cayuga and actually in Seneca County too. We haven't had the opportunity to do that much yet, but we do provide those services to both counties as part of that contract. So that's what the organizational chart looks like. One-stop services, I'm not going to get into this because I talked a lot about it already, but we say that we have an opportunity for anyone that walks through our door, whether they are a small business that's looking to open a storefront and sell trinkets, or a new core that's looking to expand and needs to add logistics services to their site, and it's a $50 million project. We have the ability to provide services all along that spectrum, no matter who they are, where they are in their life cycle of their business. We have that opportunity. The other thing that I didn't mention is that in our facilities, we also have the SCORE and the SPDC offices that are also co-located with us. So much of the entrepreneurial work that we do is screening those people and saying, you know what, you're a great candidate to go talk to SCORE, or you've got a really scalable product here, and we want to make sure that you're connected with some of those regional services that might be able to get you to that product. So growth, profitability, project assistance, education, and advocacy, that's the opportunities that we provide for existing businesses. New businesses, relocation and attraction, everything from your traditional site selection and IDA assistance to, we've got the ability right now with the staff that I have in place to do market analysis, opportunity analysis, exploration, and then we also just provide the straight open connections to other collaborators. New ventures, we help with the business planning, market analysis, the timeline, and the community resources. This is all really programs that are revolving around the chamber's part of this relationship. So we went through some strategic planning this last year that helped us identify how this was all going to work. Cayuga Strategic Solutions, as I said, when we first formed it, we weren't really sure if we were going to kind of do the Syracuse model where we were going to rebrand everything and roll out our own little mini version of a Center State CEO. But really what we're doing is very different from what they're doing there. I mean, we're actually providing assistance in a contract with the county, providing staffing services to the IDAs. So we have a membership 501c6 organization and an LDC 501c3 organization that are collaborating, partnering, sharing staff, sharing resources, and really have done it in a time frame that I've been quite amazed at. And really it all comes back to, this was something that our community was driving at for the last decade. I just happened to come in at the right time, at the right place, with the right opportunities. But that is the model that we're looking at. This is our great new fancy logo for CETA, the Cayuga Economic Development Agency. My marketing person isn't here, so I'm going to have to explain what it is. But I like the color. So, Menzo, I'll turn it back over to you. We're opening it up for questions. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I know I rattled on and rattled through a lot of stuff there. So.
Well, very talkative group. Okay, you're going to have to change that mode of operation if you're going to make this a successful event. You must do some talking.
I have some understandings of Cayuga County and the city of Auburn. How were you able to break down the various political economic barriers in order to have this? Because obviously some individuals had to give up some autonomy in order for this to begin to work.
The short answer is I'm not really sure how we did it. But that's not necessarily true. I mean, in all honesty, it came down to a couple of things. Even though this is something that I've been, quote unquote, working on and working with since 2009, never did we push for something like this if the organizations or the individuals were not willing to have the conversation.
Then let me put the question, as opposed to saying you broke down barriers, what did you offer them in order to convince them that for their constituency and their businesses, this was the means by which they could be successful?
So, transparency, opportunities for efficiencies, willingness to give up some of that authority. For example, very interestingly enough, through this whole process, even though I've been with the chamber, it's been seen that the chamber has kind of led this process. At every point in the process, the chamber was willing to either give up what they were working on, give up their identity. They're the oldest organization out of all of these, by the way. They're 110 years old in Cayuga County and have gone through several iterations. But that board had done some strategic planning of its own in 2010, which was really gave it the impetus to say, we are here only as conveners, and we are here to see that we can move forward with this. If that means we provide leadership, great. If that means we stand behind people and push them forward, great. In fact, the entire 3 years that CETA was in place before this collaboration went forward, I had so when I came in, CETA was this thing that they might do. And I actually went to my first board meeting with that chamber board. The search committee knew me, but the full board didn't. And I made a presentation to them saying we should be this economic development first stop that they've been talking about. I think at the time it was just a first stop. And I convinced them that that was okay. But they very clearly said, float this idea, but if that's not what people want, don't force this idea. Support what we can to get this moving forward.
Okay. Let's take it one more step. If anybody wants to ask questions, be my guest, interrupt me at any time. But the bottom line is, what if the Target debacle did not occur? Would what we're seeing today have existed simply because it was the most logical, efficient model? Or do people have to have their backs up against the wall before they come to the cognition that we have to begin to work?
So I will tell you that financial exigency or lack of results can motivate people to change their behaviors. But understanding the vision can motivate them to change how they're doing things even more. But the issue really comes down to setting that vision and having leaders in place who can deliver on that vision in a way that is not self-promoting, in a way that is really about the vision for the community. That's what has to happen. This entire process, I even, when I got asked to be interim director, did not go in thinking this is how we were going to end up. I went in thinking, yeah, I'll provide these services, and once we get a contract, you can do a search, and I probably will throw my hat in the ring because I'm very interested in economic development. I've been, slowly evolving my career into that realm, and I like it. But if they told me tomorrow that the only way this was going to work was for me to step away from it, I would be willing to do that because it really has to be about the vision and the organizations leading that vision.
So bottom line, when it all gets done and said, is that there has to be some type of belief that in order to succeed, we have to begin to have a common vision as to what it's going to be.
Yes.
And that in itself lends itself to that concept of strategic plan.
Yeah, when we went through that strategic partnership process, we set the vision first. And the vision was, how can we, if we can, collaborate to the place where these are the priorities for us. We want to maintain the identities because we recognize that the chamber has a long history and that CETA is set up in a different way. You can't, we looked at a merger, to be honest with you, but we would have lost so much by doing that it didn't make sense. So yes, it's setting that vision, understanding that the only way that we're going to be able to be successful when we look around us, when we look around at our collaborating and competing communities that surround us, the other counties, the other states, the other countries, we have to be working together as a community. And I'll even take that a step further and say we have to be working together as a region. We've been very successful in the central New York region having those conversations and having those dialogues. And I know prior to the regional councils, there was a lot of representation from Seneca County at that seat with the Upstate Regional Alliance and that collaboration that was going on across the 12-county footprint. So that's the long-winded answer to your question.
What level of funding was Cayuga County participated in for economic development, the county government, prior to this process starting, 2007, 2008? You said $350,000 now.
350 is what we've got them to.
What was it when you started this?
So in 2009, when we came in, there was no funding outside of the planning and economic development department. They had a director who also was the planning director. They had a full-time economic developer, and they had a couple of support staff around. The city also was doing something very similar. So the county's contribution to outside economic development, outsourcing it, was probably, if I add up if you add up the legacy costs associated with that as well, was probably on the order of about $200,000 a year, $250,000 a year. The first 3 years of the CETA contract, the county was contributing $175,000, and the CCIDA was contributing $50,000 a year. Even though they weren't getting their administrative services done by CETA, they were kicking in 50 of the 225 that CETA was getting. But I think part of the issue is that the county wasn't really getting what they were expecting of that 225. We have been able to show them that their 350 investment by showing what projects have actually moved forward, and again, it's like a snowball effect, right? We can't say that we can't take credit for every one of those projects that we touched and say without us those wouldn't have gone forward, but we can say that we assisted those. We've been able to show a return on investment that just on the tax basis alone, not including the economic impact, just on the tax basis alone, the 5-year return on that 350 investment just from last year's activities is about 128% return on investment.
So you had Cayuga County IDA
Yep.
that had probably all sorts of its own funding and cash, and then the county was shooting money in the amounts you're talking about.
The county was not sending money to the IDA. The county was sending money to the Economic Development Agency that was created in 2009. And the IDA was also putting money into the Economic Development Agency that was created in 2009 to act as a coordinating agent for economic development. And the city was only a willing participant at that point because they had a seat at the table as a board member. There was no financial commitment from them, and to be honest and frank, there still isn't.
So you had a county government that was willing to invest in development to some extent.
We've convinced them that it's a good investment.
Where's the rest of the funding coming from?
So CETA's annual budget right now is $418,000. 350 of that is from the county, and we have 40,000 that's coming in from the 2 IDAs in total right now. We have some fee-for-services that we deliver on and some grants that we get as well, and so that's where our other 28,000 comes from. So we're going to continue to grow that. We're actually in the discussion right now with both the IDAs of moving from a flat administrative service fee to a shared project fee basis. Which is what we have told them from day one. We said, look, do a flat fee for the first few years so that you get comfortable that this model is going to work and that we're bringing more deals, but not just more deals, but good deals and creating jobs. And And once you're comfortable with that, then we'll talk about a fee sharing, because we don't want to take all the fees, because the IDA needs that to reinvest in infrastructure, to maintain what they have, to be able to do the programming that they need. But we want to also take some of those fees, put them into the programming that's helping them find those deals and helping those deals develop, and be able to do more of that. So we've been very open about that from the beginning. From the beginning, it was enter into this with a flat fee, know that we are always going to be coming to you in the future to ask you to share the fees, and everyone was on board with that.
So how did this address the tax issue between, or how to solve the problem, the tax issue between Auburn,
Unaddressed.
Auburn, North County, South County, those types of?
Unaddressed remains unaddressed, and what I have said to them is the role that we play is to serve the business. And if the business site is preferred in Auburn, that's where we're going to take them. If the business site is preferred in Senate, or in Aurelius, or in Fairhaven, or in Moravia, that's where we're going to take them. And we have told the municipalities very clearly, we're not getting into that game, because the minute you ask us to do that, you are undercutting everything that we've tried to do, and we're out of this game.
So how about it, would the Auburn IDA then try to convince this same institution that what we want you in the city of Auburn, so we're going to give you
No,
a better
because-
deal than the Cayuga IDA?
No, because we're staffing the Auburn IDA. So any project that comes
you're
before,
providing services to the IDA.
any project that comes before the IDA starts with us. And therefore, we start the conversation with the business of where do you want to go? And once we've arrived at the site that works for them, then we go to the IDAs and say, this project is interested in coming into your jurisdiction. The other thing I will tell you is that the IDAs, the Auburn IDA, we've only been staffing them for less than a year now. We've taken them through some strategic planning to ask them some very direct questions, which is, why do you exist? When the Cayuga County IDA can do the same thing that you do in Auburn, why do you exist? And so they're coming to terms with that. Obviously, a lot of that is political. A lot of that is who has the strings and who has the power. But when you set the vision with them first, that's what it comes back to. When you set the vision, which is what we've done, what do you want ultimately? And that answer comes back, we want to see growth in this community. And then they realize there's a more efficient way to do it than what they've been doing it. 9 times out of 10, you will get them to change that direction and move in that direction. So that's where we are in that process with them. They are one session away from finishing their strategic planning, and they have already said, as soon as we're done with this, we want to sit down with that board and talk about how do we collaborate better.
The city seems to be, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, the city seems to be sending mixed messages about its economic vitality, and it's just a question of how you choose your priorities. The east side seems to be doing well, Grand Avenue and whatnot. The downtown is going through some interesting changes, but the west side, with Sears leaving now, and that plaza sitting there, and the thought of possibly losing Bass Pro if there's a blight that occurs. How are you setting your priorities in regard to the way things are occurring? Do the events set your priorities, or do you set your priorities to events you want to create?
A little of both. I'll come back to the strategic plan that we did. We have 3 major levers of industry in our community. Manufacturing, which is still extremely strong in Cayuga County. We have over 3,500 manufacturing jobs still in Cayuga County. Tourism, which is our fastest growing industry, and ag, which is our largest industry. Not necessarily in terms of employment, but in terms of dollars generated. It's funny that you say the West End is having some troubles. The West End has seen the most investment in terms of dollars of anywhere, because we have a $100 million milk plant that was just built in Aurelius, right across the street from the mall that's suffering and failing, supposedly. I mean, there are truth to what's being said, and there's also backstories to what's going on, and so there's a lot of dialogue about what's said in the media versus what are the realities. The other thing is right across from Cayuga Milk Ingredient, steam tubbing diesel is going through its 4th expansion in 4 years. So there is industry-wise, and Courier Plastics is also what we would consider the West End. They just did a $20 million project and hired 50 new people a few years ago. So more jobs have been created and more economic activity is happening in the area of real industrial development on that end, whereas the other end is seeing more retail and more sales tax generation. And so, brand new dealerships being built, one trying to outdo the other, and then they're going to outdo the other. And we're going to have 4 new dealership buildings built in the span of 3 years there. So we try not to let situations that arise in the media dictate the directions that we go, because our business retention and expansion program, we're out there meeting with these businesses, and so we set our priorities based upon what we're hearing from them. and based upon where we see the most return on investment coming from the economic activity.
Andrew, first of all, I commend you on your presentation, but two words I heard more than once, and one was vision. And there are a lot of visionaries. I think everybody here has a vision. But the other key word is timing. And I guess the homework assignment for all of us is it the right time to do something like this? We can't answer that tonight, but I think your presentation put it out on the table. Now, let's just say we did go in this direction. We could be a satellite, so to speak, or a dotted line for this regional. And if so, would you be willing to work with us with the dotted line from Cayuga County CSS to, let's say, a Seneca County CSS? Or do you see it going north, east, south? I mean, you've been
It's a
there.
great question.
Yeah.
One I had not thought about before. What I will say is twofold. To answer your first question, yes, the vision has to be set. And the vision for this community may be different than what the vision was for our community. And I can't sit here and tell you that this will work here. I can't tell you that because I don't know enough about the issues, the challenges, the opportunities that you guys face here. The timing of it, what I will say is that I don't think anyone can afford not to do this anymore. That's the reality, I think, of an upstate New York economy, and probably of a national economy. Because we are operating on a global marketplace, if we are not operating so quickly that we can turn on a dime and respond within hours, not days, not weeks, we are way behind our competition. And so how that vision is going to be set, I'm not sure. The timing of it, I would encourage you to ask yourself if you can afford not to do something like this in the short term. We are absolutely willing to help and work in any way that we can. Those are not conversations we've had other than we have been opening our doors for partnerships regionally. Obviously, most of those have gone east of us right now. Our chamber actually, prior to all this happening, entered into an alliance agreement with Center State CEO, the Utica Chamber, and now Portland is coming on, where we have a platform of benefits that all of our members share. We have an advocacy platform that we're bringing 4,000 to 5,000 members to the table now, not just the 400 members that we have in Cayuga County. And so we were already moving in that direction from the chamber's perspective. We would love to collaborate this direction. Less drive time, but whatever form that would take is really going to be set by that vision that needs to come from this community first, because it can't be an overlay, and I'm sure you feel this all the time. Your vision can't be an overlay of the vision that comes out of Rochester. You know, our vision can't be an overlay of the vision that comes out of Syracuse. We're closer, and so it's easier, and we have much more of a related economy. We have a lot more commuters that go from Auburn to Syracuse and Syracuse to Auburn for work, and probably you guys do with Rochester. In fact, you guys probably have more going to Auburn and coming back than you do to Rochester. And that is a fault, I think, of these regional councils, is where Seneca County has been placed. And I think there's been other counties similar to Seneca, but Seneca definitely has had a disconnect, I think, with the process as a result of geography more than anything. But we would be more than willing to do whatever we can within the capacity of what we can do to help.
I'm going to just stop it for a moment. We want to get you this awesome dinner because Cafe 19 has done a terrific job. But we want the questions to continue after dinner, after most of dinner, so we'll get you, get most of the food down you, and then we're going to open it back up to questions. What was handed out to you is just an excerpt from.
No, you're fine.
An excerpt from the Seneca Falls plan that was developed in 2007. These are the action items that were laid out then. A full copy of the plan was emailed to you all today before this dinner. So when you go back to your little email, you'll find it there. It's also on the Seneca Falls Development Corporation's website. The following statement was considered to be an appropriate summation of the Seneca Falls vision. I bring this up because, as Andy mentioned, there needs to be a vision for Seneca Falls, but I'll go by extension. There needs to be a vision for Seneca County. And because of our unique geographical location, we are neither Rochester nor Syracuse. We are neither Pop nor Soda. We're a mix of the two. Suckers and lollipops. That's where we are. And it suits us fine if we develop a vision that's suitable for our region and not driven by either metropolis to our east or to our west. And that's a fantastic place to be because we can feed both. It's the same distance. In 2017, Seneca Falls is recognized internationally as a center for education and activities related to women's history, growth, development, and human rights. Visitors can experience the legacy of women's rights movement by patronizing the numerous museums, inns, restaurants, spas, shops, wineries, and businesses supporting those committed to women's achievements. That was designed and as a summation of our vision in 2007. I'll ask you, where are we on that vision in 2015? This is the work that's before us. Is this a suitable vision? Is this where the community is at? Let me tell you something about Seneca Falls. We have one thing that no one else in the country has. We are the center, the location where women's rights for the United States came to light. The first convention was here. The folks that drove it were here. We own it. Waterloo has one thing that's unique to it that no other place in the country can claim. It is the birthplace of Memorial Day. It's there. There's nowhere else. Why we don't build on these and why we don't focus on this and build on what we own is beyond my understanding. Now, I'm taking the platform because I get to do that, right? But I just want to ask you, what is the vision? You have the action steps. You'll be able to talk about this at your tables. It needs to be driven by private concerns. And by private, it's not for-profit. It's also non-profits. It's not businesses only. It's our national park. It's our Montezuma, the refuge down here. There's so many places that need to be involved. It cannot be the government that determines the priorities for us. We drive the economics. The government is a resource, a wonderful resource of funding and organization and structure, absolutely. But the business entities and all of those in the community need to be at the table and need to establish the direction. As Andy mentioned in his presentation, the majority of his board members are from the business. Why? Because they drive it. That's what drives it. Our community recognized in 2007 as a pivotal element the women's rights movement. It's the uniqueness. The plan says the vision contemplates much more than just using women's history as a tourism attraction. It's intended to serve as a foundation that the community can use to brand itself as the international center for women's growth and development, and around which it can build a set of activities and programs which will be attractive to innovative people and companies. There really are some terrific bullet points in the plan that you've received tonight. I would like you to consider, just for discussion, point 3.1. And just note these things. 3.3, 4.1, 5.1, 5.3, 6.3, and 7.1. I'm not going to read them for you, but if you go through and look at those dots, I think you might, I hope you agree that these are really, really good ideas, good steps, good action items. The Seneca Falls Development Corporation, our intention is to update the plan to incorporate these things, but we need to update for real-life activities that have occurred just recently. Talk about timing. The National Women's Hall of Fame has great success recently in their development and their funding for the rehabilitation of the Seneca Knitting Mill. It's a world-class opportunity. The announcement of the Lago Resort and Casino in Tyre was approved by the Gaming Location Board. It's an opportunity. The Sessler's Company recent announcement for their retail development, again, near exit 41. It's an opportunity for us. ITT Cool's Pump, their recent expansion, another opportunity. It just went before the board, or will go before the board Thursday for the silo that they're going to present. They're continuing to invest in our communities. Key elements of the Seneca County Development Plan need to be considered. Have you seen the plan? It was just updated June 2014. The Chamber put out a questionnaire, asked for input from its members. It's been out there. Have you read it? Elements from the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council's Seneca County Revitalization Strategy. Long words, but they've been to our county several times. In fact, they're just presenting, I think they presented Tuesday, and they'll present again Thursday in another location, I think in Waterloo, to talk about, here's what we've got in the plan for Seneca County. Is that what you want? I hope so, because it's in there. That's where they're going to get the funding. So we want to open the dialogue for discussion during dinner. So without further ado, I'd like to stop here. I really want to say thank you very much to Andy. I think you did a great job. We just done it. And we're going to let him go over there and get some food. And then when we're done, we're going to start the dialogue and start now during dinner. We've got some fodder right in front of you. And we're right on schedule.